You're at dinner when the water in your glass tilts just slightly, then tilts back. You set down your fork. The ship is moving differently than it was an hour ago. You look around. Nobody's panicking. The waiter is still moving through the dining room like nothing is happening. Outside the window, the sky has gone the color of a bruise. The ocean has texture it didn't have this morning. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a small, reasonable question is forming. How worried should I be right now? The short answer is not very. But the reason you're not in danger is more interesting than you'd guess, and most of it was already in motion before you sat down for dinner. Here's the thing about large cruise ships and bad weather. The instinct is to think the ship survives because it's massive, and it is massive. A modern large cruise ship is a floating structure bigger than several city blocks, carrying thousands of people. Size gives you momentum. It gives you a certain stubbornness against a wave. But size is not the whole story. Not even close. What's running right now while you watch your water glass is a system. Multiple systems, actually, layered on top of each other. And the most surprising thing about them is that they started working long before the sky got interesting. Here's where most passengers' mental picture of what's happening on the bridge is completely wrong. The storm that's making your dinner sway was flagged on the ship's radar roughly 2 days ago. Not 2 hours ago, not when the clouds came in, 2 days ago. A contracted weather routing service, companies like StormGeo, which specialize in exactly this, identified the developing system and sent updated routing recommendations to the bridge. The captain and the navigation team adjusted the ship's track then, not now. What you're feeling tonight is the edge of a weather system the ship has already partially navigated around. The worst of it was avoided before you even picked up your fork. The drama you imagine, the captain at the helm, the storm bearing down, the split-second decision, that already happened. It looked like a scheduling adjustment, and you were probably at the pool bar when it did. Which means the motion you're feeling now isn't the ship sailing into a storm. It's the ship sailing along the margin of one it already moved around. The bridge is still in active communication with the routing service. Watch officers are tracking wave height and period data in real time, and the captain is making small, continuous speed and heading adjustments. This is not crisis management. This is Tuesday. But here's the part that will actually change how you think about cruise ships. You assume the thing keeping you stable is the ship's size. You're sitting in a dining room 12 decks above the waterline and barely feeling the swells outside, and your brain files that under big ship, calm ride. Reasonable. Wrong. The ship is fighting the ocean. Below the waterline, on either side of the hull, a pair of steel fins, each extending several meters out from the hull, move continuously, responding to real-time data from gyroscopic sensors that measure the ship's roll angle and rate of change. They're called fin stabilizers, and their job is to generate hydrodynamic force against the ship's tendency to roll. Think of them as underwater wings constantly adjusting their angle to push back against the sea. On well-equipped modern ships, they can reduce the roll you feel up to 90% in manageable conditions, though effectiveness drops as the seas build. That calm dining room isn't the ship being big and heavy. It's a mechanical system you've never seen, running continuously, specifically managing the motion you're not feeling. And if the fins aren't enough on their own, there's a secondary system underneath that, anti-roll tanks. Large tanks built into the hull, partially filled with seawater, designed so the water shifts to counteract the ship's lean. No moving parts, no power required, just physics doing what physics does. The pool is closed. The outdoor decks are roped off. A PA announcement mentions some motion overnight. That's the visible surface of the response. Below it, the fins are moving, the tanks are doing their job, and the routing service is still on the line. Most rough weather episodes on cruise ships end right here. The heading adjusts back, the fins were tracked to their resting position, the pools reopen in the morning. But not all of them. Say the system doesn't dissipate. Say by late evening, the swells are longer and steeper than the forecasts suggested, and the motion in your cabin has gone from gently rocking to something that's made your suitcase migrate across the floor. This is the part where the ship does something you'll actually notice. You feel the course change, the heading shifts, and the motion changes character. Not smoother exactly, but different. More of a forward diagonal rhythm instead of a straight roll. What just happened is counterintuitive enough that it's worth slowing down for, because if you were guessing what the captain would do, you'd probably guess wrong. The instinct is to either point the bow straight into the waves, head on, fight through it, or turn and run with the swells behind you. The answer is closer to the first, but not what you'd picture. Running dead bow on into heavy weather at speed produces slamming, the bow lifting clear of each wave and crashing back down, which puts serious structural loads on the hull and isn't something you sustain for long. But turning and running puts the swells on the stern quarter, which introduces yaw, erodes steering control, and in severe conditions raises the risk of the stern swinging sideways across a wave face. What the captain actually does is angle the bow slightly off the direct line, taking the weather across the forward section of the hull at a shallow angle rather than dead on. That angle spreads the wave impact, reduces the slamming, and keeps the ship pointed broadly into the weather, where it has the most directional stability. The captain didn't turn away from the storm or charge blindly into it. The captain found the angle. The ship also slows down. At speed, a hull hitting a large wave face generates enormous structural impact. Navigators call it slamming, and it's genuinely hard on the ship. Slower is better. The crossing takes longer. The schedule shifts, which brings up a question you're probably already asking. What about tomorrow's port? If the diversion has moved the ship far enough off schedule, or if arriving at the next port means heading back into the worst of the system, the captain may skip it. The cruise line will typically refund the port fees, which are a separate line item in your booking, and may offer some onboard credit. What they don't owe you is the cost of the day itself. An independently booked excursion, a shore tour you paid for outside the cruise line system, a non-refundable reservation you made on your own, those sit in the gap between what the cruise line covers and what you actually lost. Trip interruption coverage in a travel insurance policy was designed to sit in exactly that gap. Whether your specific policy covers ship diverted due to weather the way you'd expect is worth reading closely before your next sailing. And there's a second question that's been sitting quietly in the back of your mind since the deck chairs got lost down. What if it actually gets dangerous? Here's where the engineering becomes genuinely reassuring. Large cruise ships are built to international safety standards. The maritime convention that governs vessel stability is called SOLAS, short for Safety of Life at Sea. And those standards require cruise ships to maintain a significant positive stability range, meaning the ship can sustain a substantial degree of heel, far beyond anything you would ever experience as a passenger, before capsizing risk even enters the calculation. The engineering tolerances are a safety margin built inside another safety margin. The captain's job isn't to operate at the edge of those margins, it's to divert before those margins matter. The reason you don't get to watch the ship test its limits isn't because the limits don't exist, it's because reaching them is never the goal. The danger you imagined wasn't really on the table. What was on the table was a logistics problem, and it was being solved on the bridge before you noticed the sky changing. Morning comes. The water glass is still. The ocean outside is gray-green and textured, but the long rolling rhythm from last night has smoothed into something ordinary. The routing service confirmed the system moved through. The captain has adjusted the heading back toward the revised itinerary. Somewhere on the ship, a crew member is unlashing the deck chairs. What happened overnight isn't really a survival story. Thousands of transits happen every year. Weather events requiring routing adjustments are routine enough that cruise lines log them, analyze them, and feed the data back into the next forecasting cycle. The storm wasn't an emergency. It was a scheduled variable, one the ship was designed for, staffed for, and had already started navigating around 2 days before you felt anything. Next time you're at dinner and the water glass tilts, you'll know what's already in motion. The routing adjustment that happened while you were at the pool. The fins below the waterline pushing back against the swell you're not quite feeling. The captain angling the bow slightly off the direct line, finding the heading that spreads the load rather than concentrating it. That water glass isn't a warning sign, it's a feedback signal. The ship noticed it too 2 days ago. It's already handled. That's another one for the cruise files. If you want to learn more about what goes on behind the giant cruise ships, everything from the scams on board to the secrets below deck, subscribe, like, and share. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.